Welcome, Bronco Nation and current Pac-12 fans, to another exciting video. Boise State, along with Fresno State, San Diego State, and Colorado State, going to the Pac-12. I am absolutely blown away by this news. I will be the first to say that I did not predict this, that I did not see this coming. Obviously, it was a possibility. Obviously, it was something that we've discussed on this channel. But if you watched any of those other videos, you know that while listing it as a possibility, it was not the most likely. And I listed it as the least likely possibility. Every fact, every data out there indicated the Mountain West was in the stronger position, that it was the more likely to bring in the Oregon State and the Washington State. However, the Pac-12 refuses to die. And back from the ashes like a phoenix, you have the Pac-12 rising again in a new form. It is not the Pac-12 of old. There's going to be the same logo, but completely different teams. It's going to be a completely different conference moving forward with different expectations, and we'll talk about that. But for Boise State fans, what a position to be in. For the last 15 plus years, we have been trying to get into the Pac-12. That's the destination we wanted to go. Other realignment rumors have come around. Oh, we're going to the Big East, and we actually accepted that before we backed out. Oh, Big 12 might be opening up as a possibility. All of these have been spread about before, but the Pac-12 is always the former Pac-12 has always made the most sense for Boise State. Geographically, it aligns with where Boise State is. They have established rivalries and games with a lot of the teams. They play them in the non-conference quite often. Washington State, Oregon State, Oregon, all those teams. They played Utah. There's history there. All of those teams lined up well with Boise State. That's where Boise State fans wanted to be. So sitting back now, saying we're in the Pac-12, the Pac-12 logo is playing on the Boise State video board. It is a surreal position to be in for sure, and there is definitely a lot of excitement. However, like I pointed out, that's the Pac-12 of old. That's what Boise State fans wanted to get into. This is not that Pac-12. And so I think that there, in an initial reaction to this, there are mixed reactions for sure. There's mixed emotions. I think overall the fan base is very excited, but I think at the same time, it's because we've wanted to get into the Pac-12 for so long, we aren't necessarily fully considering what it is that we're getting into. So we're going to get into that in this video. I'm going to talk about my initial reactions to this move by Boise State. Obviously, this video coming out within 24 hours, but not right after the news broke. News broke last night as I was literally turning off my phone to go to bed. I saw the news was breaking. It did keep me up for a little bit longer. Unfortunately, I was unable to make a reaction video real time in the moment. And I think it's better now that we've actually had some time to wait. Had to wait till I got off work to come home and make this video. So there's been time to wait. We've been able to see some of the more details come out, which I think is going to make for a better video. But I will give you what my initial reactions were. I'm also going to talk about what this means now for Boise State, why this happened, and in light of the news that has come out since, what my reaction is in this current moment to this news for Boise State. We're also going to talk about in this video what's next for the Pac-12. They're going to be adding these 4 teams, but they're still only at 6 members, so they have to add at least 2 more teams to be conference eligible, to be able to stay alive as a conference, have to get to 8 teams. So this is not the end. There has to be 2 more members at least being added to the conference. As I was coming on to make this video, the same person that broke the news, Ross Dellinger, was saying that multiple teams have reached out with high interest to joining this new Pac-12. So the teams are lining up. So it should not be a problem for them to necessarily fill these voids. Obviously, you want to add the right teams, but it seems like there is high interest, and that interest can always wane and ebb, but for now, there seems like there's high interest, and there will be more additions. But who are those additions going to be? We'll talk about that. And don't forget the Mountain West is getting left behind as well. We're also going to cover that. What happens next for the Mountain West Conference? This is a conference that has withstood many rounds of conference realignment, going all the way back to Utah leaving, BYU leaving, and they've managed to stay relevant and stay in the conversation. Is this it for them, or is there a path forward? We'll talk about that as well. So it's going to be a very, very packed video. I want to hear your comments as well. And in addition to that, tomorrow I'm going to be doing the first ever, never done one before. I've been on other people's to do them, but I've never done one myself. first ever live show, Bronco Blameyer live show. We're going to have a familiar face, Ron Counts, formerly of the Idaho Statesman, now up with Hero Sports, is going to come on, and we're going to talk about this. So it was not the original plan when we made this. It was just to talk about Boise State and where their path is now after the Oregon loss and going forward. But we're going to talk about this as well. So it's going to be a great video talking about the Pac-12 situation, talking about where Boise State is right now, where their position battles are, what the future looks like coming in through the rest of the season for them, where they realign, and their chances of CFP. We're going to talk about all that. We're also going to take your questions and your comments. So make sure that you comment or are interactive in this video. I want to be able to have that discussion with you here, but also look forward to that video tomorrow. I would love to have those live conversations with all of you as well. Again, first time, so fingers crossed that works out. Didn't really do that right. Fingers crossed that works out. So let's move right into this video because there is a lot that we need to cover, and I don't want this to be an hour-long video. So for Boise State joining the Pac-12, initial reaction. Not necessarily my reaction right now. I'm going to cover why that has changed, but initial reaction in the moment, I was a little bit different than the rest of the fan base, which is shouldn't be a surprise for longtime viewers of the show or followers on Twitter. I often find myself at odds with the trend of the perspective in the fan base. I was shocked, obviously. Like I said, I did not predict that this was coming. I did not see this as an inevitability. I thought, again, that the Mountain West was going to absorb the Pac-12 teams, that it wasn't going to happen the other way. If it was to be a reverse merger, we'd have more Mountain West teams coming on, basically look like a Mountain West under a Pac-12 logo, and that's not what happened. They did not I would say the worst case scenario, but the least likely scenario, actually poached 4 teams. They're going to have to pay a huge buyout. They're going to have to pay $43 million for only taking the top 4 teams. And then those teams are also going to have to pay a $17 million buyout per school as well. So again, did not see this coming at all. However, in addition to that initial reaction of just shock, which I think was shared with the fan base overall, there was also a reaction of, is this a good thing for Boise State? And I always do that. I always look at the pros and the negatives. And initially, there were a lot of negatives hitting me. First off, you look at the instability. Boise State is leaving a conference of 12 teams, which has a strong football and basketball presence. They've done great things under Gloria Nevarez. I'm excited about the future. I was excited about the future of that conference. They seem to be positioning themselves to be the top conference in the group of 5 to set themselves up for that guaranteed CFP spot. They are the top 5 conference champions. There was a lot of good things happening with the Mountain West, and now they're leaving that. They're jumping somewhat into the blind into a conference that's not even a conference yet. There are 6 teams here: Oregon State, Washington State, Boise State, Fresno State, San Diego State, and Colorado State. That's it. You got 6 teams. You're jumping blind into that, and you add in the additional instability of Oregon State and Washington State. Oregon State and Washington State already have a foot out the door. If the if the ACC collapses, if something happens that they lose members, and they come calling for Oregon State and Washington State, and while I don't believe them to be the top targets, I think they would go after USF and maybe Memphis and some other teams on the East Coast. If they did choose to call for Oregon State and Washington State, which others have said that they would take that in a heartbeat. You cannot tell me that they would choose to stay in the Mountain West if the ACC came calling and gave them an option to move over, assuming that it wasn't a completely cannibalized ACC. So there's a lot of instability here. Not only is this not a conference yet, not only is it 6 teams total, but also has 2 teams that have been doing everything they can to try and find their way into another conference. And in the ever-shifting landscape of conference realignment, if that happens, these 4 Mountain West teams are now left holding the bag and trying to either scramble back into the conference they were in or try and now reform this conference on their own without the former Power 5 brand power of Oregon State and Washington State. And so that gave me qualms for sure. And then you also have the cost, which we've talked about. Again, $17 million exit fee per school. That's the cost for Boise State, but it's also cost for these other programs. $43 million buyout or poaching fee. So you're talking about $111 million that is being paid to the Mountain West because of these teams exiting. And so that's not a great financial situation to be moving into. I know the Pac-12 has their own assets, and they have a large chest per se from the legal deal that they worked out with the exiting schools. But you're you're spending a chunk of it here, especially if you start trying to assist with buyouts. And then you have the additional cost of Boise State of the loss of their own TV status. Boise State, because of a negotiated deal when they came back from the Big East, is allowed to negotiate their own TV contracts on top of what the Mountain West does. They get to negotiate those separately. So right now, the Boise State is getting an additional $1.8 million above what every other Mountain West school is getting. So they lose that as well, I assume. I mean, I would be surprised if they carried that over into this newly formed Pac-12. I don't have the legal details. They're supposed to be released sometime today, or some of those details are supposed to be released sometimes today to the media. But I haven't seen those. And right now, you're again assuming that Boise State loses that special privilege, which again was a strong privilege. I mean, I don't think any other schools in college football get to do what Boise State does because of their brand pull, and so you lose that. And then of course, I've already mentioned it with Gloria Nevarez. I mean, Gloria Nevarez was doing great things. She was such a step up from Craig Thompson, so much better of a conference head for the Mountain West, and she was doing really, really good things. She had done great stuff to keep the Mountain West together when San Diego State had tried to leave. She was really, I think, pushing the conference forward and actually not just being a potted plant, but actually stepping up and trying to raise the national awareness of this conference and put them into the national spotlight. I really liked what Gloria Nevarez was doing, and you're looking at a Pac-12 conference, which, again, it's not the same leadership because those people lost their jobs because the conference fell apart. But historically, you're looking at a Pac-12 conference that has had some of the worst leadership of any former Power 5 conference in the country. So you're leaving a conference with very, very strong conference leadership. Again, whatever your thoughts were on Craig Thompson, at least he was stable throughout. And Gloria Nevarez has been a huge step up in pushing the league forward. So a conference with a history of strong leadership or stable leadership into a conference with a history of some of the worst leadership in college football. And again, it's not the same leadership, but that's their history. And it does suck to leave Gloria Nevarez with everything that she's done for the Mountain West. And then you have the final question of, is this conference any better? Again, a lot of Boise State fans reacting with excitement like, we're joining the Pac-12. Well, we're not really joining the Pac-12. We're joining a conference that's calling itself the Pac-12, but this is not the Pac-12. This is not a conference full of Power 4 programs. This is not a conference that has top 25 teams and has tie-ins to the automatic tie-ins to the CFP. They lost that. The NCAA stripped them of that automatic money tie-ins. Like they don't get the Power 4 money that the rest of the conferences do. I think they're getting like a payout of, I wrote it down on a previous video, but it's like $3.8 million or something like that. So you're not getting that CFP money that the Power conferences are. Then you don't have that automatic tie-in system like you did with the New Year's Six. So now you're sitting and looking at this. Is this conference any better? Like if you're considering, obviously it is now better than the Mountain West, because the Mountain West has just lost 3, and Colorado State of their flagship programs from that conference. So this conference is now better than that one. But is it better than what the Mountain West was before when it still had those 4 teams? And it's tough to say. It's going to depend on who they add, but it's more of a lateral move than it is a clear step up. And they could add some really great teams. I mean, if they go out and they can convince some former members to return, or they can go out and grab top programs like Memphis and maybe Tulane, and some of those programs that have been consistently strong over the last few years. At least I know Tulane not necessarily consistent, but they have stepped up and been good over the last few years. If you can grab a couple of those programs, then yeah, I think it would be a step up, but not significantly so. And especially when you start looking at all these costs that we just discussed, and also a lot of those questions and the instability from Oregon State, Washington State, it is a bit of a head scratcher that this happened. And it is why I was not predicting it to happen. However, we've had some time to assess, to have other news come up, to look at what this means. And I do think that this is going to turn out to be a good move for Boise State, even though I am still in a state of shock that it happened. And one of those things, first off the bat, is Jeremiah Dickey. Jeremiah Dickey would not jump blindly off a cliff with the rest of the San Diego State and Colorado State lemmings to just hope that something happened. I mean, San Diego State definitely would. San Diego State, if the SEC official Twitter account liked one of their posts, they would announce that they're going to the SEC whether they had an offer or not. So I mean, San Diego State would be first step out the door. And Colorado State, I mean, they are probably shocked that they got an invite right now. So they probably got a letter. They tried to forward it over to, Colorado. This mail can't be for us. They got sent back to them. Colorado State opened up. It was for them. It's a little scenario that I think happened here. But Colorado State is shocked that they they are actually invited. So I'm sure that they were first ones off the diving board into this new Pac-12. And that could definitely have been what spurred this on. I mean, I know that Jeremiah Dickey said that in the last 48 hours, things escalated. He did not expect to be having this conversation today. So this I think it was in his press conference with BJ Raines, and it was reported on Twitter. But he said he did not expect to have this press conference or this situation on Monday. This happened so much faster than he anticipated. So my guess is that somehow they found out that a couple of these other schools probably had made the jump, and now you had to jump so you weren't left behind. But at the same time, Jeremiah Dickey's not just leaping blindly into the void. Even if it is a situation of, okay, other schools are going, we have to go too and take this opportunity, there still has to be a plank to step out onto. He's not just going to step out into the air because other teams are jumping as well. And so there has to be a solid plan for additions that would give him that confidence. So while I don't know all of the specifics, I do know that Jeremiah Dickey is our athletic director. And so the fact that he's our athletic director gives me confidence that there are things I don't know that are going to make this deal better than what it seems at face value. I also had a source contact me and let me know that he expects Cal and Stanford to return. Now, I'm not saying that I'm necessarily predicting that. I am simply reporting what a source told me. I don't just... If some random person messages me on Facebook or Twitter and says, hey, I have some news, I don't just blindly repeat it. I do vet them. But this is a Bay Area media member. This isn't just some random person saying this. And he passed me 4 bits of information, and he's been right on 2 out of 4 of them so far. So the 4 things he passed me was, 1, that the news was going to be announced at 6 a.m. Pacific time. This was before, I know that got announced pretty quickly on Twitter by other people, but this was told to me before that happened. So that turned out to be true. He also said that the Pac-12 was going to likely be assisting in the buyouts for these teams. And I know that I don't think that has been officially stated yet, but I know that other media members are reporting something similar. I know BJ Raines said he suspected that to happen as well. So he appears to have been right on that as well. So the other 2 things that he told me were that it is expected that Cal and Stanford will return, and that the conference will target SMU because of the Dallas market. Now, again, whether that happens or not, I don't think it's essential to Boise State joining on the fact that maybe those 2 teams will come back. And again, at my first initial analysis of that, I know a lot of people in response to my tweeting that out are saying the same thing. That seems unlikely. They have the guarantee of rights in the ACC. The ACC is still a power conference, so I don't know why you would leave that. Cal and Stanford, though, they don't really make logical decisions when it comes to football. They may just be looking at the cost of traveling and say, hey, if we can play football closer to home and it's a step up from the Mountain West, will do it. And so maybe that's decision making. I don't know any more of the specific details. I have reported everything I know. I do trust this source. The source could be wrong. He's been right on 50% of it so far, though, so who knows what will happen there. However, at the end of the day, it's not just about Cal and Stanford and so some of those other teams. There are other programs that you can go after that would elevate this conference. So again, I am finding myself more comfortable with this decision because Jeremiah Dickey is in charge, and also because of some of the other things that's being reported. The source that told me that maybe those teams would come back, but whether or not that's true, Ross Dellinger also saying that other teams are running to try and join this conference, which also gives me confidence in the fact that we are going to be able to attract those. Because again, I didn't know whether or not 6-team conference is going to be able to attract some of those other members to come and join, especially those in the top level of the group of 5. And so some of those things are being answered, and especially if my source is right on Boise State being assisted in their buyout, that does make this less costly. And so whether it's a lateral move or a slight step up, it does help remove some of those negative costs that we're taking away from the positives of this step. The other things to think about for this, obviously, are the potential TV deal that can come out of it. Right now, the current Mountain West TV deal is $5 million per member. Boise State's also getting, like I said, an additional $1.8 million, but that's very, very low. Can a conference with the top programs from the Mountain West, or most of the top programs from the Mountain West, combined with Oregon State and Washington State and some other bigger teams or markets coming in as well, can they present a more valuable package to and ESPN, which I would love for Boise State to get back on ESPN, or maybe a better deal out of Fox or the CW network or something like that. Can they present a more valuable package for it? I think they can. I think that they are more likely to draw in a larger revenue source in the Mountain West. And both the Pac-12 and the Mountain West were going to renegotiate their TV contracts in 2026. And so Jeremiah Dickey sitting back looking at both of those, and I don't know what he thinks, but assuming that he's looking at both of those and he's saying, what's the best path for this university? Where are we likely to be able to market ourselves the best and get those best TV deals? A new Pac-12 under this banner with the Pac-12 branding and notoriety combined with the top teams coming over from the Mountain West and maybe some other teams coming up from the group of five as well does present a valuable TV package. And so I think that you have a higher TV potential, which again would offset some of those costs, especially if you're not paying as much to leave in the first place. Then you have another positives, which is the potential for bowl tie-ins. You cannot really get better than, you cannot really get worse. Yes, you cannot really get worse than the current Mountain West bowl tie-ins. They are some of the worst in the country. We have our conference champion right now is playing the 6th or 8th ranked team from the Pac-12. And so even our best team was playing a mid-level Pac-12 team. And again, it was complicated how that was going to work going forward. But again, mid-level Power 4 team. That's our best bowl tie-in. And it's our only guaranteed Power 4 conference tie-in or former Power 5 conference tie-in. Everything else, we have a bunch of ones that are lined up with ESPN. They can throw us where they want to, but everything else is lined up with, like, we play Conference USA's second best team. We play the MAC's like second or third best team. I mean, we play terrible bowl tie-ins. You cannot get worse than what the Mountain West has. So the Pac-12 right now chose to maintain their current tie-ins with current and former members through 2025, so into and stopping at the 2026 season. So there's a chance in the 2026 season, especially depending on who you bring in addition to the tie-ins that the conference already has and those relationships that they've already developed, to maybe get some better bowl tie-ins. And again, you cannot get worse than what the Mountain West currently has. Now, at the end of the day, the bowl season is becoming less and less important. So the most important factor, and I'm sure the one that was at the highest level for Jeremiah Dickey or the athletic directors of all these other schools, is that path to the CFP. Does this give Boise State a better chance? Something that Jeremiah Dickey is saying all the time is that we have to control what we can control. Control our own destiny, control what we can control. There's going to be outside factors that we cannot control, but whatever we have in front of us that we can control, winning, getting the money for the sponsorships, bringing in the booster support, stadium improvements, all of that, doing what we can on our end as Boise State to push ourselves forward. And so the path to the CFP, it's not worse than the Mountain West. At the very least, this, with the teams that have come over, this is a lateral move. So it doesn't get worse. And you could argue, definitely depending on who gets added, but you could definitely argue that the chances get better. I mean, right now, where Boise State is sitting, they are in a 5-way head-to-head competition with every other group of 5 champion to try and go get that 5th spot in the CFP. And again, as I've said before on this channel, it is not a group of 5 slot. It is the 5th best slot. And so theoretically, you could have 2 group of 5 teams ranked higher than a Power 5 program, the champion. And it has happened in the past. And so you could have 2 group of 5 programs and 3 Power 4 teams get in. That could happen. So it is not a group of 5 slot. But again, the way the rankings shake out, strength of schedule, all of that, you're basically fighting between you and the 4 other group of 5 conferences. And so you have a situation like what is happening right now where Boise State goes out and plays Oregon, plays them really close, almost wins that game. If not for 2 kickoff for a punt return and a kickoff return for a touchdown, 2 horrible special teams disasters, they win that game versus Oregon. But Northern Illinois goes out and beats the MAC. Beats Notre Dame. Stumbling over my words. Goes out and beats Notre Dame. So Northern Illinois, team out of the MAC, goes out and beats Notre Dame, and now they're ahead of you. And you're also having to compete with Liberty out of Conference USA, and you're having to compete with JMU or App State out of the Sun Belt, and you're having to compete, maybe not App State so much after that demolition by Clemson, but you get what I'm saying, top teams out of the Sun Belt, and you're having to compete with the Memphises and the UTSA and the Tulanes out of American Athletic Conference. But now here is a chance, and again, it depends on who they add, but here is a chance for you to do two things. One, take some of those competitors that you don't get the opportunity to go head-to-head with and bring them into your conference so they're no longer a threat. You have a chance to weaken the other conferences that you are competing with now. It will be 6 conferences going after that spot, but you have a chance to weaken some of your other competitors and bring them into your conference. Weaken the conference champions of other conferences you're having to go to, and bring in some of those top programs, and now you're going head-to-head with them in your own conference games, and you're also building your own strength of schedule so that now when you go up against those other weakened conferences that you've gone and raked over and taken away their top teams, and their teams are not looking as good, regardless of record, you have the strongest schedule out of every other group of 6 conference that is out there. And again, this is not going to be a Power 5 conference for Boise State's joy. This is not Power 5. This is now, again, part of that group of 6. They don't have the CFP money designator like the other Power 4s do. This is not going to be a Power 5. But this will be a very, very strong group of 6 conference with a clear case for best conference in the country, bar none. And again, especially if they bring in some of those top champions. So path to the CFP gets a little clearer here for Boise State. All they now have to do is win their conference, win most of the games in their conference. They can even survive a loss in conference and still, at the end of the day, look stronger than these other conferences across the country. So there's that opportunity as well. And then at the end of the day, this is better than getting left behind. Again, I do not, on this case, do not have any inside information on who pulled the trigger first. But prisoner's dilemma, San Diego State and Colorado State probably jumped first. That is just based on the attitudes of those schools, the cultures of those schools, is my assumption that they jumped first, and then you had to go because you didn't want to get left behind. So at the end of the day, being in this new Pac-12 is better than an alternative. Would it have been better for all 4 teams to stay in the Mountain West and add in Oregon State and Washington State? Maybe. We've talked about some potential positives that make this better. But at the end of the day, the alternative to being left behind with San Jose State and UNLV and Air Force and Wyoming and everybody else that's not in this mix, and again, being the team like Boise State has so many times before on the outside looking in, this is definitely better than that. And so I am excited about this move. My initial thoughts, looking at what are the drawbacks to this? But it seems that breaking news afterwards and also looking at the potentials seems to outweigh this. And at the end of the day, it's going to be an exciting change of scenery for Boise State to have that Pac-12 logo, to be playing some new teams. Oregon State and Washington State are now conference mates. There are some real strong opportunities for established rivalries. Oregon State and Washington State. Boise State really just doesn't have those strong established rivalries. Washington State, Oregon State, those are 2 teams that have historically, at least in the modern era of college football, been able to be pretty consistently good. And also you have the geographical nature, how close those teams are to Boise State, so you have that added rivalry as well. And then the fact that these teams have played quite a bit already, and there is a little bit of a rivalry nature. I think there's some real good opportunities to establish rivalries with Oregon State and with Washington State as well. So the future is very exciting. The future is very bright. And to quote a Jeremiah Dickeyism, what's next for the Pac-12? Well, obviously, the first step is you've got to add some more members. That you cannot stay at 6. So there is literally no other option but for the Pac-12 to add some more members. So there will be more realignment. They're going to be adding more teams. Who do they go after first? Again, if my source is correct, it's Cal and Stanford. I have doubts about whether that is correct or not. And I just me, on my basis, looking at alone, I would say that the odds of that happening are probably less likely than they are to actually occur. So Cal and Stanford obviously get you to 8. Again, my source said they're going to target SMU. I do not think SMU is going to go. They just paid, every single booster just paid out their kids' college fund to join the ACC. And now, while you could offer actual TV revenue, which SMU is not getting for it's like 7 or 10 years or something like that, which could be a draw, I just don't see that being a move, especially with how the ACC currently is. Unless something catastrophic happens with the ACC, I don't see them making a move over to the Pac-12. And so, for me, I'm going to say the likelihood Cal, Stanford, SMU returning, at least in the short term, not very high unless something happens with the Pac-12, with the ACC, and it very well could. I mean, that was supposed to be the next conference realignment domino. I don't think anybody saw the Mountain West getting cut down at the knees as the next step forward in conference realignment. So that is still on the tables. All of the lawsuits are still working their way out. Clemson, Florida State, still trying to get out of that conference. So that could very well happen. We'll see what happens down the road, but I don't see that happening right now. But again, my source was right on 2 out of the 4 things so far. So we'll see if he can continue to increase his overall percentage there. However, let's assume for now Cal, Stanford, SMU out of the equation. You're not going to draw in any teams from current Power 4 conferences. So who do you go after next? I think the next obvious step up, the next obvious look, and I hope that some of these teams are the ones that are already applying, is going to be going after the AAC schools, American Athletic Conference. Their buyout is not as egregious as the Mountain West if they do it within or at 27 months or greater. Give them 27 months or greater notice. They only have to pay $10 million. If it's inside of 27 months, and I think with 2026 coming up, they are right inside of that window. I mean, they might just be outside of it. I might be doing my math wrong there, but they're pretty close. If they're outside of 27 months, then it's a negotiated amount. Cincinnati, when they left, they paid $18 million to leave within a year. So nothing like the Mountain West, where if you leave within a year, you're paying $34 million. They're giving their 2 years notice here, $10 million to a negotiated amount, probably no more than $18 million max is what you're having to pay if you're a AAC school. So who do you go after? I know that a lot of people are excited about a potential East Coast conference division to this new Pac-12. And I think that is definitely a future projected potential for this conference. I think that is where this conference will eventually go. But right now, in the short term, where you're trying to establish yourself, you don't have a TV deal worked out yet. There's still a lot of things up. You don't know what your bowl alignment is. There's a lot of things up in the air. In the short term, I think that it's going to be a little bit more of a regional focus. I would see the American Athletic Conference targeting the Texas schools, so going after UTSA and North Texas. UTSA obviously is a program accelerating on the rise, and North Texas is doing a lot of things to try and raise their brand, paying a lot of money for their facilities. Obviously gets you a foothold into that Texas recruiting market. And geographically, it makes more sense than, going after an East Coast school, somewhere in Virginia or something like that. So I think that going after a UTSA or North Texas does make mostly geographic sense. Even makes more sense than a school in Tennessee or something like that. So overall, those are the 2 teams I think they target first. I think you also are. I mean, you're talking just simply adding to your conference strength. I think Memphis and Tulane are going to have to be in this conversation for sure. Memphis, I think that is a program that has consistently proven itself that it has the potential to be a Power 4 type level program. And so I think getting Memphis would be a huge bid for the American Athletic Conference, for Pac-12 if Memphis was interested. And then Tulane, again, a team that seems to be on the rise and recent success compared to previous, but I think that they're a program you could definitely go after as well. I know a lot of people are projecting, with who knows how accurate their sources are, that those teams, at least Memphis and Tulane, are going to be targeted by the Pac-12. And so I think you see one of those 4 teams in the mix. A team you did not hear me mention, and you will not hear me mention as a potential addition, is USF. I think USF gets left out for the same reasons that UNLV did. You'll notice in those 4 Mountain West schools that we named, UNLV was not one of them. One of those teams that time and time again ends up on the top lists of potential expansion schools. Boise State all the way down here, and UNLV all the way up here, along with teams like USF. And I have said many times on this channel, I have shouted it from the rooftops that UNLV is not an expansion school. They do not care about football they don't not care about college football in Vegas. It is not a college market, and I've proved that with the actual TV numbers that UNLV puts out. I will put a link to a description that goes so much more in depth as to why UNLV and USF are the two worst expansion candidates for any kind of conference expansion, especially Power 4. I'll put a link to that description. That video covers everything I've ever wanted to say on the subject, and I don't want to reiterate myself. I also included San Diego State as part of that, but I did say that I used them as more of an example of why Boise State should be better than them. I did say San Diego State is at least an upper-level second-tier expansion candidate. I am not surprised, especially with the success of their basketball, that they were included in this edition by the Pac-12. But UNLV and USF, two of the worst programs you could ever select to be added to a conference. In addition to that, I don't even know if USF would want to come to the Pac-12. They have Power 4 ambitions down there in Tampa, a city that doesn't care about them, and a city that USF is actually having to build a smaller stadium because they cannot, in the massive TV market that is Tampa, they cannot fill up the NFL stadium that they're in right now. And so they're building a stadium that's actually smaller than Boise State's because they cannot fill their stadium and bring in a steady routine fan base. And so USF, not an option. Again, I don't even know if they would be interested. I think they have Power 4 aspirations. I think they are holding on to see what happens with the AACC. So either way, those are the schools I think you look at in the AAC. However, if for whatever reason, it's not the end of the world. If you can't get those teams, you can't get those schools to come up, you don't have to go dipping into Conference USA or the MAC or the FCS. You're not in desperation mode. If those schools say no, you just come back to the Mountain West. You have teams that are eager, jumping at the bit for an opportunity to be in this new Pac-12 conference, that are sitting there just saying, shocked that it happened, but also, how did we get left out? UNLV is one of those teams. UNLV, strong basketball program. They definitely did not make the first cut, and that definitely makes sense. But if you're going to go back into the Mountain West, they're sitting there as an option. They would even take a reduced cut, I'm almost certain of it, to join this conference. And so you can just go and find a couple of programs here. UNLV, maybe San Jose State, because of the regionality with the California marks, and they are good, research school. They were listed as one of the top schools academically in the country. And so maybe you go have San Jose State. Hey, Niumatalolo, he's doing some exciting things with that program. Maybe they're on the rise. Maybe that wouldn't be that bad of an addition. I'd say maybe Air Force and New Mexico would maybe be considerations for this as well. Air Force makes a lot of sense when you're talking about TV viewership because of the audience that they draw in, being an academy school, and they basically have the whole military watching them, and you also get a cut of that Commander's Cup TV viewership. So Air Force definitely makes a lot of sense in that sense. And then also on the football field, most years, not this year, major rebuild, but most years, Air Force is pretty strong football, 10-plus wins. I mean, they do make a good addition. The big question, though, however, obviously with Air Force is just the regional TV market. Again, I don't think that should matter. But also at the end of the day, who pays the buyout for the academy? I don't actually know. I was talking with Master Football before I came on here. He's doing his own video. Make sure you check out his channel. I'll put a link in the description of his channel. He's going to do his own video on this. But he made a good point of who pays that. Is it the taxpayers? I mean, I know that the Air Force coaches are considered government employees, so who pays the buyout? So is Congress having to approve the buyout package for the Air Force Academy here if they leave the Mountain West? And so things get a lot very hairy when you get to that situation. You also have the fact that, of course, Air Force, their facilities-wise, much smaller stadium. It makes sense that they weren't included in this first round, and I think that also are reasons that they would be potentially left out, especially if the Pac-12 was only dipping back in to grab a couple of teams. New Mexico, great basketball program if you're looking to add a basketball school, and I think that was a consideration. I mean, obviously Fresno State doesn't really bring that, but San Diego State does, Boise State does, Colorado State has routinely been a strong basketball school. They were good last year as well, and so I think that those three teams bring you that basketball presence. I kind of misspoke there. I wouldn't say Colorado State has routinely been a good basketball school, but recently they've been pretty good. So those three teams bring you strong basketball in addition to football, and so maybe you go after New Mexico. Hey, Bronco Mendenhall's down there. He's doing miraculous things. They haven't won yet, but they are a program that's been very close, and you can tell that there is a change in culture. Who knows what Bronco Mendenhall will do with that program, and what he could do if they moved into the Pac-12 with a higher spotlight on them. So maybe you go after New Mexico. I think that Hawaii is definitely out of it. The travel cost is prohibitive, and they don't really bring anything in basketball or football to the field. Unfortunately, proud heritage, but not recently. Nevada, unfortunately, nobody wants to go down to Reno. Choate, he's doing great things. I love Choate. I hate that he's doing great things at Nevada. He is doing great things with what he can at Nevada, but Nevada's just not an expansion candidate. And then Utah State, one of those teams that's just really a mess right now and doesn't bring a lot to the table. Wyoming, kind of in that in-between gray area. You know, obviously bring them on. Now you have that rivalry with Colorado State. They're a tough place to play at. They've done some good things to build up that program in Laramie. The new coaching staff isn't doing great to start the season, but it's hard to replace a legendary coach like Craig Bull. I expect good things out of them going forward. I'd put them in the lower side of the maybe column, but I would expect if you were to go back into the Mountain West, you would probably go after UNLV and San Jose State. But either way, whoever you wanted to take would come, and you'd be able to fill your docket of 8 teams minimum. So Pac-12, very, very safe. And I also like the thought process. This is a different Pac-12, obviously, in teams-wise, but it's also a different Pac-12 in their approach. You'll notice, again, they didn't go in and add, New Mexico. They got that huge market in Albuquerque, and they're a tier 1 research institute. They didn't go after San Jose State, who doesn't necessarily have the football success, but they're a great research institute. They're somewhat close to other markets. Like maybe we go after San Jose State. You didn't see them going and grabbing UNLV again, higher level academics and the market. You didn't see them doing that. You saw them doing exactly what I have called for so many times on this program. They went after teams that bring on-field success, because it doesn't matter what your TV market is if you don't bring success and wins with it. And if you don't have a winning culture, if you don't have that, it doesn't matter what else you have, because nobody's going to watch you play. You have to have a winning culture, and you don't get that overnight. It takes years to build up a culture where even when you don't have winning seasons, you still have a winning culture where the team looks competitive. I mean, look at Boise State. Last 3 seasons have not been shining moments in our history or in the group of 5, but we've still had a winning culture. We've had an expectation of success. We've had the fan base has continued to turn out more. They've increased their ticket sales even in losing seasons. We've been competitive game to game. We've still beaten top 10 programs. We went out and beat BYU on the road. They still have a winning culture even in a spat of losing, and you get the right coaching staff in there, and now you see them quickly reestablishing themselves on a path. We're back to the future and to rebuilding that past and that strong winning seasons that they had before. And so you have to go out and get the teams with on-field success that have the winning culture. You have to go out and get the teams that have a passionate fan base. You have to have an established, passionate local fan base that's going to create that buy-in. Again, it doesn't matter how big your TV market is. If you don't have that established local fan base, that TV market is going to get swept up by the radiuses of other bigger programs, whether that's an NFL team, which is really hard to compete against as a college program, or regional Power 4 programs in your state or in surrounding states that are close enough to you to be a fan of them. It's going to be hard for you to draw in the market if you don't have the fan base already established. And then you also talk about brand potential. Boise State, one of the most marketable brands in all of college football because of the blue turf. Fresno State, a long storied program with many years of success. They make a lot of sense. In addition, I've listed them as a top expansion candidate along with Boise State, Memphis, and Fresno State in the past. San Diego State, I mean, they are a team that's definitely in the national awareness now, especially after their stunt of trying to jump to the Pac-12 before, but also because of their basketball success. And I think that they're going to be building, maybe not showing right now, but I think they're building towards something of establishing some actual strong football success on the field as well. Colorado State, that's that one that's a little bit of a head scratcher. That one I really don't know if I can justify per se, but Colorado State has done a lot of things to try and build up their facilities. They've poured in millions of dollars. They want to be a Power 4 level type program. They are a team that, like I said, recent pretty good in basketball. They're a team that could take that step forward with the right things happening for them. I think even this year could see a huge step up for Colorado State. Again, rough start to the year, having to play Texas and whatnot, but I think that Colorado State is a team that is setting themselves up to take that next step forward. And Masterful made a good point that you've got the Denver airport, which is an easy airport to fly in and out of, and so it makes a good transit hub. And so there's some good reasons to grab Colorado State. I've actually said they'd be a better expansion candidate than UNLV. At least at least Colorado State has a passionate fan base. They still have that passionate fan base. They lose so many games, but they still have a passionate fan base and that potential. They can develop that culture of wins and success. UNLV doesn't have that. Nobody in Vegas cares about UNLV. That's not true for Colorado State. And so I like the thought process here. Pac-12, they're not going after the Ivy League type academic institutions. You didn't see them trying to bring in San Jose State as one of those top four, at least not initially. So they are approaching this with the right mentality. And again, that gives me confidence for this Pac-12 moving forward, even if, again, my initial reaction wasn't, I'm cheering in the streets. The fact that they're coming at it with the right mentality, in addition to all the other positives and potential positives that we listed, definitely gets me excited for the potential and future of this league. However, right here towards the end of the video, there is one conference that we need to discuss that has really been through the works. I mean, they lost BYU, then they lost TCU, Utah, and then TCU, and now, finally, after many years of fighting to keep it together, they've lost Boise State, Fresno State, San Diego State, and Colorado State. And is this it? Is this it for the Mountain West? I'm going to say I don't think it is, because, first off, Gloria Nevarez. You've heard me say her name many, many times in this video. She is an outstanding conference director for the Mountain West. She is an incredible conference head for any group of five conference. In fact, I would love if the Pac-12 could bring her over, because I think that she is bringing something to the table that's different and is elevating the status and level of this conference. I think that she is going to do the right things to keep this conference together. You also have the fact that even though you've lost your top four or top three-ish flagship programs and Colorado State, this is still not a terrible conference. This is a conference right now. I mean, Pac-12 could come dipping again, but right now, this is not a terrible conference. They are still a conference at 8 teams. They lost 4, but they're still at 8. And now you're left with UNLV, San Jose State, Hawaii, Utah State, Nevada, New Mexico, Wyoming, and Air Force. They're at least the third best conference in the country. Not third best, but out of the 6 that there are right now, they are better than the MAC and they're better than Conference USA. So yeah, third best. Right? Yeah, third best. So they're at least the fourth best. Man, I cannot do my math today. So yeah, so they are above the MAC and Conference USA. I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm struggling here. It's been a busy day, but whatever. They are at least better than the MAC and Conference USA with just 8 teams that they have right now. I think maybe there could be a conversation about them being at least equal, but they're not the worst. They're not the worst conference with the 8 teams that they are right now. So I think that they can take their time and do this right. They will add teams, and they will have to add teams, but I don't think that they're in a rush. I think the 2 places that you're going to go is probably going to be Conference USA or the FCS. American Athletic Conference, you're not going to draw teams from there. They will still be better. They'll still have the East Coast branding and bias behind them. You're not going to draw teams from there. Sun Belt Conference looks like they're going to be able to maintain probably most of their membership. Maybe some teams will flow to the American Athletic Conference, but I expect that actually Sun Belt will put themselves in a better position from this, and they'll be strong, and you're not going to lose teams from the Sun Belt Conference. You're also obviously not going to draw any from the Power 4. So what does that leave you with? Potentially the MAC, but the MAC kind of has their own thing going on. They developed some really good cohesion up there, playing their own brand of football, good relationships. I don't think you tear teams away from the MAC, and none of them really make any geographical sense for you either. So I think what you're left with is the Conference USA or the FCS. So for Conference USA, the top teams that you could go out and grab, and I think teams that would be ready for the step up to the Mountain West, would be UTEP. Obviously, program that has a history of Boise State, which we're not going to mention. But obviously, I think UTEP would be a team you could go out and get. New Mexico State has done some really good things to elevate the level of their programs. New Mexico schools are doing some really good stuff right now to elevate the level of both of their institutions. And then they came in second in Conference USA last year, and they just almost beat Liberty last week. So New Mexico State, team that I think could come in and be competitive in the Mountain West. And then Sam Houston State, I think there's a lot of potential there. They're close to that Houston market. They played really solidly. They lost a lot of games, but I mean they kept most of their games close. last season. I think there's a lot of potential, and it would bring you into that Texas market. And overall, most of these teams, again, would make general geographical sense for the Mountain West. So I think Sam Houston State is potentially where you could go. Now, those I think are going to be your first go-tos. You don't have to rush it. You can take your time. You're still a conference at 8. You can see what the landscape does. But eventually you're going to have to expand. If you go to Conference USA, and again, you don't have to rush because nobody's going to be going to Conference USA, at least these teams from Conference USA, to fill over if they lose teams from the other conferences, to fill that cup if it pours over. The American Athletic Conference, they may lose teams, but then they're going to go down to those East Coast teams primarily. They're going to go after teams like Liberty, maybe MTSU, Jacksonville State. They're going to go after teams like that. These 3 programs are not going to be geographically aligned with the American Athletic Conference or Sun Belt, and they don't have the record of success to be drawn in. So these schools will always be there. If you want to go grab them, they'll likely take the move, and they'll be available for you to grab. If for whatever reason you cannot get the Conference USA teams, and maybe even if you do get the Conference USA teams, it's time to maybe go look at the FCS. I think that you have 4 teams, which I've said many times on this channel, which would be great additions to the Mountain West. Montana, Montana State, North Dakota State, and San Diego State. Montana and Montana State, I have talked about them many, many times on this channel. You can look up your own facts if you want to. You can go back and watch previous videos. I'm not going to go too in-depth because we are running a little bit longer than I wanted to. Too in-depth talking about these 2 programs. But they're both strong teams. They are both had a consistent record of success in football. They both bring some pretty good success in basketball. I believe it was Montana State went to the playoffs the last 3 years. One of them has. I might be mixing them up there, and I know that's very offensive to Montana State fans because they're rivals. But they both have a pretty good history of basketball. I believe it's Montana that has a little bit more consistent history of basketball, but Montana State has gone to the NCAA playoffs the last 3 years in a row. And so both of these teams, I think, would make good additions for both. Geographically, they make perfect sense, I think, for the Mountain West. Not too hard to travel to. These would be great additions. And then, if you talk about losing flagship brands, national brands for your team, and you're wanting to not just regain, but maybe even elevate the level of the conference post losing the 4 teams that you did, North Dakota State and South Dakota State. Both of these teams are absolute FCS football powerhouses, and they're ready for the step up to FBS. They could come in and compete day one. They could come in and win the Mountain West day one, especially this Mountain West. They could come in to the current Mountain West, the pre-2026 Mountain West, and maybe be competitive for the Mountain West Championship game. These are both teams that came within inches, basically, of beating FBS programs. You had South Dakota State almost beat Oklahoma State, really close game, and then North Dakota State almost beat Colorado. It took a lot of penalties by Colorado to win that game, but both of these programs have clearly shown that they are ready for the Mountain West. Geographically, they don't necessarily make perfect sense, but they're not that far off. They're only a couple of states over. They do make pretty good sense overall. You'd basically see a Mountain West map that kind of went like this, mostly Western schools. They're definitely Western schools. They're part of the culture. They have that small town vibe, but play bigger than that. They would be perfect additions for the Mountain West. And so I think whether or not you can get Conference USA teams to come on or not, you should at the very least attempt to come in and get some of these programs, especially North Dakota State and South Dakota State, at least in football only, if you want to cut down on travel costs. Montana State, I think, would be great additions for both, especially because you're losing some powerhouses in basketball. I think these teams could come in and maintain or at least not lose too much of a level there. But then North Dakota State and South Dakota State, incredible additions for football that could really keep this Mountain West Conference in the contention and then a contender for potentially the playoff, or at least in the national discussion amongst the group of 5 programs, and put you ahead of, maybe potentially give you in that conversation to be the 3rd best team. And so before I was trying to say 4th best team. I don't know why I couldn't figure out the math there. Again, very busy day, but put you in that contention to be that 3rd best team behind the Sun Belt and the new Pac-12. You could put yourself in that conversation. So it's going to be exciting this could happen in days, this could happen in months, it could happen over the next couple of years leading up to 2026. Whatever is going to happen here, there is so much to talk about. We haven't even scratched the surface, so make sure that you tune in live for that discussion with Ron Counts. I want to have that discussion with all of you. I want to have that discussion now in the comments as well. But tune in live tomorrow for that discussion with Ron Counts. We'll be talking Pac-12. We'll be talking Boise State. We'll be talking hashtag what's next. So whether you are a Boise State fan tuning in, or maybe you're one of our new Pac-12 brethren trying to figure out what's going on in this latest stage of conference realignment, for the first time ever on this channel, I can proudly say, go Pac-12 and go Big Blue!